All right, everybody, and welcome back to the Gulf Coast Growth Show. I'm your host, Jason Lee. My co-host, Clint Aiken, couldn't be with us today, but we have a special guest, Chad Burke's joining me. We kind of pivoted today and jumped out of our normal routine. We had a few shows in our backlog, but we had the pleasure of being able to invite former Texas Railroad Commissioner and now, or always has been, President, CEO, founder of Pinnacle. ART here in Pasadena, and really the data guy when it comes to all the information that we're going to be sharing today. And so we couldn't be more honored than to have Ryan join us and kind of filling us in. We know there's been a lot of talk, a lot of just information kind of coming from all over the place. And so why not get the person who knows energy from bottom to top here in the state of Texas and have them join us. So we're just honored and blessed to have you with us today, Ryan.
That's really nice of you to say, Jason. Very gracious. I'm glad to be here.
Fantastic. So we're going to dive right in. So we know a lot of things happened in the last week. The purpose of today's call or podcast is really to highlight ERCOT, what took place over the last week, really a kind of an overarching theme of energy. I think a lot of people don't really grasp just how many different sources of energy, what the makeup of energy is here in the great state of Texas. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what could be done next time, maybe some forward thinking, observations or learnings from this previous experience. And so Chad's going to help me lead the discussion. Ryan, we're going to dive right in for our audience. Help us understand a little bit about ERCOT, Texas, the power grid that we're on, really what the makeup is.
Sure. Well, a lot of people don't know this, but the United States is basically divided into three power grids. There's the West Coast, the East Coast, and Texas. So Texas has our own power grid, and we stand alone, isolated for the most part from the rest of the country. And so when you hear about power generation facilities like power plants, coal plants or nuclear plants, natural gas, wind, all of those are in Texas. They're all hooked up to the grid, and at any given time, when you turn your light switch on, and electricity is flowing through your wires and into your lights, that electricity can be coming from almost anywhere in the state of Texas. But depending on what's happening, what time of the year it is, what facilities are on or off, what weather you're experiencing, that power can be coming from a lot of different places, depending on where you live, once again, what's happening in the state, what the weather conditions are. So imagine that we have 550 power generation facilities in the state of Texas. And those 550 different power plants send electricity all the time onto the grid, and you as a consumer are getting electricity for your house from some combination of those facilities. Well, goodness gracious, that's a very complex animal. 28 million people live in the state of Texas, something like 10 million different residences, that are on power, that's not even counting office buildings, things like that. And then 550 different power generation facilities and millions of miles of power lines stretching and spanning all over the state. That's an extremely complicated system that is managed every day by the Public Utility Commission, which is an agency in the state of Texas, and ERCOT, which no one had ever heard of until about a week ago. And now we all hear about this ERCOT thing that is an agency within itself that is the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. And and ERCOT's job is to try to manage this very complex grid and ensure that we don't have massive power outages, which is why everyone is asking the question, what the heck happened last week?
Yeah. Ryan, give us so you said we had 550 different power generation facilities, and I know that's a lot of different things, including up into our petrochemical industry, where many of our facilities feed electricity back into that grid. What's the current makeup, percentage-wise, if you can, on our power generation sources? So what is natural gas versus nuclear versus coal versus renewables like wind and solar?
Sure. Well, let's talk about a couple of numbers and that are important to understand. There is capacity, and then there's actual production. So if you said, for example, in a normal February, when you get the sort of normal average temperatures in Texas, the state of Texas is probably using somewhere to the tune of, at any time, probably 50, 60,000 megawatts of power are running at any given time, just powering the state of Texas, okay? Megawatts, thousands of megawatts of power, so 50,000. However, how much capacity do we have is something like 130,000 megawatts of power at any given time. Now, the thing, so how are those divided? So in other words, if every power generation facility in the state of Texas was running full on all the time, roughly 50% of that power would be coming from natural gas, 21% would be coming from wind, 18% would be coming from coal, and the balance is coming from hydroelectric, nuclear, other small sources of power. So it is noteworthy that wind is the second largest capacity of all of the different types of energy that we have. Now, if you ask me, but at any given time, what percent of that capacity is running, it's never 100%, right? So if you say, well, we have something like, 60,000 or so, 65,000 megawatts of generating capacity of natural gas. Well, at any given time, not all of it is running, right? Some plants are down because the power is not needed. Some are down because they're down for maintenance. Some are down because one of them tripped. So ERCOT's job is to manage which of those are running at which times, what is anticipated, that sort of thing. But yeah, Chad, to answer your question, that's the breakdown of the total capacity of generation that we have in the state today.
Good. Walk us through what happened to create the outages. A lot of people don't understand how that could happen with this much capacity and that many generation facilities. How does it happen that all of a sudden we don't have power?
Yeah, well, to understand a quick supply chain discussion, right? So in other words, I think about the consumer, I'm sitting in an office building right now, and when this light switch turns on, how does that electricity get to me? Well, there are some wires that are connected to this building, and these wires run out of this building up to a high power wire that runs a lot further down to a distribution terminal. We'll see those sometimes. You're driving around, you see a big collection of big towers and really thick wires coming out. And those distribution centers are getting power from a power station somewhere. So an even bigger collection of really big wires is running from that distribution area back to a power plant. And that power plant is generating electricity a number of ways. It can be, if it's a dam at a lake, it's what you call hydroelectric power. Water is flowing down through the dam and spinning a turbine. That turbine is generating electricity and sending that electricity over a big wire to a distribution area. If it's a gas power plant, natural gas is coming in, they're burning it. The exhaust is being injected onto a turbine, spinning that generator, and that's generating electricity. If it's a coal-fired power plant, they're burning coal, and the coal is being used to heat water, and the steam as it's coming out is being injected onto a turbine. That turbine is spinning, electricity is coming out. So and then there's windmills, right? As wind is blowing, the windmill's turning, that's turning a generator, sending electricity through the grid to that distribution center, to the wires, to my light switch. So what happened, Chad asks the question. As all of these electricity facilities are running normally, they have to plan to shut down for maintenance. In fact, coal-powered facilities are the ones that are the most complex and they need the most maintenance normally. And so as a coal-fired power plant, you work with ERCOT and you figure out when is there going to be not much demand for electricity so that I could shut this power plant down and do some maintenance on it. Well, let's say we're gonna plan to take ours out in February. And part of the decision of when to take a power plant down is based on when, as you bid, as a power generator bids to supply power to the market, they're watching that bidding in reaction to what ERCOT is forecasting. So if ERCOT says, we expect there to be this much electricity needed in February, then the power generators say, well, there's not that much electricity needed, so I'm not going to bid to fill the market with power. Instead, I'll plan to take my power plant down. That's part of the function of ERCOT. So one of the things that happened in February last week, was that some people had shut their plants down because typically February is not a high demand month for us, right? Yeah, we see some cold temperatures, but not near as cold as we did last week and not for near as long as we did. When are the real peak demands in Texas? It's in the summertime. In August, end of July, August, early September, that's when we see the normal peak demand. So most power generation plants are planned to come down in the wintertime. That was problem one, was some plants were off the market because we didn't anticipate there was going to be this huge demand. The second thing that happened is that you had some plants that had mechanical problems due to the cold temperatures. What kind of mechanical problems? Well, just like our houses, these power plants have lots of water lines running in them. And if you're getting 5-degree temperatures or up in the panhandle, we were seeing negative Fahrenheit degree temperatures for a string of days, you had water lines freezing up. You had valves freezing up. People heard stories of windmills freezing up because the rain had fallen and frozen up so quickly. So all over the place, mechanical problems were bringing down facilities that were supposed to run that could not. So between plants being shut down in a planned way, plants that, they didn't have to be shut down, but they were because we didn't think there was a need for the power, and mechanical problems in plants that were supposed to be running that couldn't because of these issues, you had a total of 46,000 megawatts of electricity was offline. All right, so of the 30,000 that we normally have, 46,000 megawatts was offline, and that spanned all sorts of facilities. That was wind, that was nuclear, that was coal, that was natural gas. All of them had plants that were down and couldn't put power into the market when we needed it.
So it was literally a perfect storm.
It was.
Yeah.
Unintended.
And demand exceeded supply, right?
Yeah. So we needed more electricity. And what caused us to need more electricity than we expected was all these cold temperatures, and all those cold temperatures simultaneously shut down plants. Yep. So you had this imbalance. There just wasn't enough electricity in the grid.
Yeah, my understanding too is if you're planning, this is a historic event, and like you had mentioned, what's not historic is 100 and 120 degree summers in Houston. That's not in Dallas and the Panhandle. That's just every year for us. So trying to work around a schedule that says you could essentially do preventative maintenance is a standard thing in the world of operating plants. We do it. It's happening every year out here or constantly in the ship channel in the port region. So it's just you happen to shut down several of them, and then you have the disaster of several going out of commission because of some kind of fluke. They're frozen when they were never really designed to be built in areas that are going to go negative degrees. It doesn't happen down here.
So that leads into the what should we do? What are the ramifications of this? What are the changes that we need to be made? I mean, and we don't experience rolling blackouts like California does in August and early September because Texas has planned for that, right? We know it's going to be 110 degrees first week of September, right? We know what that demand is going to be. So now, just like we couldn't plan or didn't prepare for Harvey and 4 feet of rain over a 3-day weekend. What do we do moving forward, Ryan? What are some of the discussions that you heard in Austin about, about oversight of ERCOT, about avoiding this type of catastrophe moving forward?
Yeah, and it's a great question, and I'll tell you that the answer to that question is going to be a lot more complicated than what I'm about to say, but I'll give you the sort of vein that it needs to be answered in. And you mentioned, Jason, you were very kind in your commentary about Pinnacle. Arguably, we're the largest data-driven reliability company on earth. I mean, we spend our lives doing this every day in mining operations and refineries and chemical plants and water treatment plants, helping these very complex systems look at their data and figure out how to optimize their reliability. And in terms of the power generation issue, I think we're gonna have this is gonna kind of fall in 3 buckets. One bucket is, when we plan for maintenance and outages, do we need to reconsider how that planning is done? Do we need to look at the possibility of what we have thought of in the past as 50-year and 100-year events coming in ways that we haven't anticipated in the past? And there's going to be some serious questions about that. The next question is going to be, what can we do to anticipate? So a week before these temperatures hit, we knew they were coming. In fact, I was in Denver the weekend before, knowing that these temperatures were coming, and I was talking to my wife and daughter back home, saying, "I'm not sure I'm able to get back home," because we had gone up there on a planned trip beforehand. Turns out I couldn't fly back for an extra 3 days because the airports were shut down, everything else. So we knew this was coming, and if we know it's coming, what can we do to more quickly bring additional power generation capacity online, right? That was one thing we saw, was that no one reacted fast enough to supply the extra power to the market knowing this was coming. That's bucket 2. Bucket 3 is, are there easy things, affordable things that we can do that would address some of the mechanical problems that we saw from this cold temperature that wouldn't introduce hundreds of millions or billions of dollars worth of cost, but could help us improve the reliability a little bit. That's a pretty sophisticated analysis, but it is one that can be done. The fourth bucket, and this is probably what's going to be the hardest for people to digest. If you went back in time and said, Ryan, I'd like to make sure that what happened last week never happens again. In other words, I get it. It was a 1 in 50-year event, but even when those 50-year events happen, power outages are not okay. Well, that may be a pretty big price tag, right? You mentioned Harvey. Is it possible for us to make sure that there's never gasoline shortages and toilet paper shortages and water shortages? Yeah, it's possible, but are you willing to pay 20 or 30% more for your electricity so that every time one of these 50-year events occurs, it doesn't go down? That's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of Texans. And so there's that fourth bucket, which is how much are we willing to spend to get how much more reliability? That's probably the most complicated and the most thoughtful analysis that's going to have to be done to answer this question. So if you look at those four buckets, if we can answer the questions, what can easily be done, how much reliability can we buy with a lot of money, what can we do to bring plants back online faster, and then can we plan these outages a little bit more strategically? Those are the four things that are going to be done, I think, in the next probably couple, 3 months, and even over the next year to strategize for the future around our power generation grid.
Right. Go ahead. I was going to say, very well said. No, that breaks it down because again, in the end, there's a cost benefit analysis of what's it cost to make it 100% reliable, and are we willing to pay that price every year when, like you say, it's a 1 in 50-year event. So there's a lot that goes into that, but there's some low hanging fruit there, obviously, with the reliability side, as well as scheduling generation capacity at different times of the year. Maybe we push that back into the comfortable month of March.
So one thing I would add, and thank you, Ryan, for your time. One thing that we've always championed over here in the Economic Alliance, and even with your help, is the state of Texas. One thing that we do really well is come together to serve the Texans. There's a certain significant amount of pride to that, and one of the things that this organization does specifically is it touches on several counties, several cities, and it takes a nonpartisan approach to solutions and solving problems. And that's really what you just described, which is walking into this with the idea of how do we help the most people, but also how do we not have a trickle-down effect that inadvertently hurts people for the once in a lifetime catastrophe, and how do you blend those things? And what I know and I'm confident of is there's organizations like this one and people like yourself and the other individuals we've had on the show that wake up every day, they go to work in their company, and then they spend their free time, which is not a lot, fighting and championing for those individuals that get up and turn on the power and or hop in their truck and go down the street, and they're looking for ways to make a difference or trying to figure out how to keep their gas prices reasonable and affordable so that they translates to the consumer costs that we have when we go to the store. And so there's a big overarching weave, and that's really the purpose of this show and the purpose of our gratitude for individuals like you who have to get up, lead a team, lead a family, do all those things, and then as their side gig, hop on a million conference calls a day and maybe talk to the lieutenant governors and people like that in your spare time. Sounds like a fun hobby. So we've been following you on LinkedIn. Chad, do you have any ads, or I'll wrap up the show?
No, I just want to say thanks to Ryan. We're blessed to have him as part of the team here at the Economic Alliance. Appreciate your insight. What we've done here today, hopefully, is shed a little light and explain to everybody what happened and then now what we can do moving forward. So appreciate it, Ryan.
Well, thanks for having me. I think it's great that y'all are helping fill the right now there's a lot of chatter going on and a lot of misinformation and incomplete information. Thank you for making sure we're getting good information out there at such a critical time. Well done.
Good deal.
Thank you. And so to our audience, just a friendly reminder, Ryan just released a couple of books in the fourth quarter of last year. One of those is very much a data-driven book, which essentially helps kind of give you some backdrop into what I would say is helps validate his messaging, which is we don't speak it unless we can prove it and support it with data. And so that's a great thing to pay attention to. Make sure you check that out and subscribe to our show. You can go to the Economic Alliance Houston Port Region page. There's a media tab. You click on it, subscribe to any of our channels, and make sure when someone says something that maybe doesn't align with what with the real story of the energy down here in Texas, send them a quick copy of this episode and share it, and tell them to ask it to share with a friend. We look forward to seeing you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in, and we appreciate all that you do.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.